From here starts the speaking test. This is the speaking mock test of the International English Language Testing System taking place online in Ross IELTS Academy. The candidate is Ilya. The candidate number is 01313458. The examiner is Luisa Meinusch, examiner number 443533. Good afternoon, my name is Luisa. Would you please tell me your full name?
Nice to meet you, Luisa. My full name is Ilya Rublev. You can call me Ilya.
And can I see your identification, please?
Sure, you can. Here you are.
Okay, thank you so much. Then let's get started with part one. In the first part of the exam, I will ask you some personal questions. Let's talk about your hometown. Where is your hometown?
Right now, I live in Mogilov. It is situated in Belarus, but I have been living here since the age of 3. And before this, when I was a child, I was born in Russian Federation, and for 23 years, I've been living here in Mogilov.
And how many people live in your hometown?
Well, I don't really know exactly how many people there are, but I guess it's about 60,000 people or even more.
And what's the oldest part of your hometown?
It's definitely the center of our city. It is situated on the western side of the river Dnieper, and there are lots of 5 staged buildings and a very old castle, which is a museum actually right now.
Now let's talk about volunteer work. Have you taken on any volunteer works?
Unfortunately, I didn't take there, but if I would have a chance, I would definitely do this kind of job because it's really interesting and it puts you into some situations that you have never been.
So how would you define volunteer work?
I think that it's something that makes you feel happy and that is your passion to do any particular kind of job, like when you are told to help an elderly or to create maybe some kind of help, to provide some kind of help for people. I think that you have to be open-hearted and open-minded to do a particular kind of job.
So would you be willing to do some volunteer work in the future?
I would really take part in some kind of sports game. Maybe if there will be a competition, I would really be happy, like, to help somebody. Like, especially if there will be foreign participators, I would rather like guide them through.
Now let's move on to talk about high school. Do you still remember what happened on your first day of high school?
I think so. I remember when it's kind of difficult because we have different high school system here in Canada, like and in Belarus. But when the age of 10, I entered the 5th grade, and it was really like interesting and like full of emotion days when you first meet your schoolmates and you need to share and maybe even to know better each other. Like, it's always about to start conversation and maybe the things will go on.
Do you still keep in touch with your friends from high school?
Yes, sure, I do. And it's the fact that they are the best friends of mine. Even after we finished our high school, I was almost on the weddings that they had, and with 2 of them, I was the best husband's friend. Their wedding.
Do you miss your life in high school?
I think no. I don't think so. It's just because as life goes on, we need to move further to new opportunities and to new opportunities. We don't need to dwell on some things like we don't need to be connected to the past from my point of view. We need just to move on. Life goes on, and we're still good with this.
All right, that's it for part 1 now. We can move on to part 2. So in part 2, I will give you a card with a topic, and then you will have to talk about the topic for 2 minutes. You have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can take some notes to help if you wish. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Great, then I will start sharing my screen with you so you can see your cue card. Okay, so you should describe a friend you had in primary school. Your 1 minute of preparation starts now. Okay, so your 1 minute is over. You may start speaking now.
Okay. So my best friend is Vyacheslav. I've been known him for 15 years straight, and he's the kind of person that is very kind to anyone. He's open-hearted. He always tries to help someone. Like if there will be some volunteering job, he will definitely take part into this. Also, he is tall with blue eyes, and like he always tries to support me in everything that I'm willing to do. Like I was really nervous and not sure whether I need to take this mock test, but he ensured me that I definitely need to do this right in this way. Unfortunately, when he was at the age of 10, his right eye was damaged due to some accident at school, but still he is a positive guy who doesn't even think about like to stop the life or even and he didn't even want to find the solution of this problem. Um, there are plenty of things that we were doing together, like skating, going to some cafes, partying. As I've mentioned before, I was his best friend during his wedding, and I find his wife is find his wife very also kind, and like she's reliable as well as he is. Like previous, and we still keep in touch. Yes, like previous weekend, I went to Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and here we went to some cafes and restaurants. And also we went to a swimming pool with him, and we had some occasional sauna there. And
Okay, thank you. That's your 2 minutes. Great. Okay, so we'll stop the screen sharing. That's it for part 2. Now we can move on to part 3. So in part 2, you talked about a friend that you had in primary school. Now in this part, I want to ask you some questions that are related to this topic. What are some essential qualities every teacher should have?
Well, I think that teacher should first of all love his job. Like he always needs to find this contact with pupils, because sometimes pupils can't be really reliable, and maybe a lot of pupils come from different families with different lives and destinies, and you always need to find the contact with them so that they will treat you like you are a teacher, and you will receive the knowledge that you really need to in your future life.
What are some pros of studying on a distance learning course?
I find this really not suitable right now. I always appreciate the eye-to-eye contact and when you talk with person in a flash. Like you need to see the person to see the emotions. I don't really appreciate the situation that brought us COVID-19 situation. Like almost all of us went to a outsourced, yeah, on online teaching, on online learning. I don't really appreciate this kind of activity. I find it's rather important to see each one in flash.
Mm-hmm. Does everybody get equal opportunities to study?
Um, I believe that everyone should have such an opportunity. Unfortunately, due to some financial problems or maybe not willing to learn something new, a lot of people just don't want to go to study. Not a lot of people, like several people, yeah, we can say. But it's not the point there. You need to improve. You need to study. You need to be up to date in order to support the conversation or to hold on the conversation. And it's not only about conversation. When you get your job or when you study, you can get your job, and it will bring you money. Moreover, it will bring you new opportunities and maybe new friends and so on.
Okay. So in your opinion, what makes someone a good student?
I think it's the one who doesn't always like take notes. He's just a thorough listener or viewer, and he can just take those little pieces of knowledge from different sources. Like this one, I will listen to a lecture, and this one I will read in this particular magazine or a book. And so he needs to be flexible, like to find the information from different sources. Moreover, it's kind of natural to do this way because you don't need to think and to dwell on a particular kind of book. You always need to develop it, especially in modern worlds where you can find information definitely like from YouTube channels or different forums. It's always interesting to find the information that you really need. I think that's what it matters.
Okay. So what are some advantages that universities bring to society?
Um, from my point of view, I can say that it concerns my country, but the scientific background that university brings, it's always a good idea, like to bring those huge scientific research laboratories into university in order to develop. In order to develop not only the particular field of science, but also to encourage young people to participate in this action. It's always good, like to bring fresh minds into some particular job and particular job. Like it's
Okay.
always a good start, a good opportunity too.
Great. Thank you. This is the end of your test now. You can sit back and relax for a second. I will need 1 or 2 minutes to add up your overall score. I will mute myself for that, but I'll be right back with you and then we can talk about your feedback, all right?
All right.
Hello everybody! Do you want to know what band score you will get in your IELTS writing? Do you also need to know how to improve your writing skills for the real test? We've got the solution for you in Ross IELTS Academy. Send us your writings. We'll check them out thoroughly in less than 36 hours. You'll get the band score along with comprehensive feedback in both written and video formats. It's your time to become our next successful candidates.
Great. Okay. So before I dive into the criteria of your IELTS speaking, I just want to talk about the parts in general, right? So as you might have heard before, part 1 is more personal questions. So there is no need to go into real detail in your answers. I think the length of your answers was fine. You know, not too long, not too short, 3 or 4 sentences, depending on how long they are, are just fine there. And then part 2 is all about talking at length, right? So you need to cover the full 2 minutes and cover all the bullet points that you see. I think you managed pretty well to, cover all that time, cover all the bullet points. So your time management was definitely right there. And then in part 3, it's more about coherent answers, right? So longer answers, elaborating your topic a little bit, connecting your ideas kind of, which you did great. Okay, so that's that for your parts. And then moving on to your criteria, right? So the first one is your fluency and coherence, then the lexical resource, grammar and accuracy, and lastly, your pronunciation. Those are the 4 IELTS criteria. And I just want to start with your fluency and coherence. Right. So I think overall you do have a very good command of your English, right? You don't have any problems coming up with ideas or just, like keep babbling on. You just, you went for it and that was great. Okay. You also had very nice connectives and discourse markers that you brought in there. So you did have some, variety in there. For example, you didn't always say and, but used moreover, things like that. You did have use some of them a little inappropriately sometimes. For example, you said as well as he is in the middle of a sentence, which didn't really fit right in. But those are just those little things. I think in general, you do have very good control of your discourse markers and you bring them in there very appropriately. Then you did have, a little bit of hesitation here and there, but it wasn't really that bad. And I think it was mostly content related. So whenever, I think in part 2, you managed pretty well to fill the full 2 minutes. However, when when you feel like you don't know how to go on, either try to wrap up the answer nicely, or you can always, for example, you can give more examples of a situation that you're talking about. You can give more details. You can tell lies, like nobody cares about the truth there. You can just tell whatever you want to as long as you show off your English, right? And then you can always go off topic, right? So there might be topics that you are not that comfortable with or that you don't have a lot of information about that might happen in your test, right? In this case, try to make some reference to the question that you're here and then switch to another topic. I think in this case, you were pretty comfortable with the topics. I mean, you were definitely able to talk about it, even about the volunteer work, which you didn't do yourself, but you were able to, come up with something. If that happens in your test, just try to go off topic and talk about something that you do have more information about and maybe better vocabulary, right? Because you cannot have perfect vocabulary for everything. Nobody does that. Right? So, try to switch to the things that you're more comfortable with. Right. And then one more little thing is in part 3, I asked you a question about giving me pros, like advantages of studying long distance, right? And you were more talking about the cons pretty much, right? You were talking about how you don't like it and that you prefer eye to eye. I mean, it was a coherent answer itself, but it wasn't really in reference to the question, right? So pay very close attention to that. And even if you're not convinced that there are any pros, just come up with something. Just lie, right? That's fine. Nobody, as I said before, nobody cares about the truth here. Okay, so those are things for your fluency and coherence. That's why I gave you a 7 there. Now let's move on to your lexical resource. As I said before, you do have a very good command of your English. You felt you sounded very comfortable and you're using less common and a lot of idiomatic vocabulary, pretty confident. And, just like little inaccuracies here and there. But I think overall, you're very comfortable with your idiomatic English. So that was great. You said things like to dwell on something. I appreciate this and that. That was definitely great vocabulary used. And then you paraphrasing. So paraphrasing, do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you did paraphrase effectively here and there. I think sometimes you could try to do more just to not repeat your own words. If you do know how to, if you do have a topic that you know a lot about, maybe you know a lot of vocabulary as well. So, try to not repeat your own words too many times. That does happen when it comes to hesitation sometimes. When somebody's running out of ideas and they start repeating what they said with the exact same words. Try to avoid that. However, I think generally you do have very good vocabulary. That's why I gave you an 8. Okay, so now moving on to your grammar and accuracy. So generally, you were definitely able to, use some more complex structures. You had different kinds of complex sentences in there that you used. So, for example, some relative clauses, some conditional clauses, and so on. So you were definitely comfortable with that. You just had some little things here and there. So, for example, once you were trying to build a conditional clause, but you used the wrong time. Right. So what you said, I think you said, if I would have the chance, but it should have been, if I had the chance, I would do this. Those are just these little things to make that kind of perfect in the end, right? To pay very close attention to. Then your tenses, I did hear a lot, like a wide range of tenses. That's also very important, and you managed that pretty successfully. So great job there. Then just like teeny tiny grammatical mistakes that occurred sometimes, or for example, you sometimes had a problem with your plural, right? So matching your plural noun to your verb. That was just once or twice, but still, you said, for example, there is lots of buildings. There are lots of buildings, right? Or you said you used peoples instead of people, right? Because you were talking about multiple persons, so it's people. Peoples with an S is a different word. Okay, just these little things. And then you also here or there, I think it was maybe also because you were nervous and, kind of rushing into some answers, is that you missed some articles here and there. So, for example, you said when you talk with person eye to eye, when you talk with a person eye to eye, right? Those are little things that sometimes get lost in the process, especially when you're nervous. I mean, that's fine. You can just, listen to your self-talk again, and then maybe try to figure out if there's any, if you were maybe too fast in one answer, or if you're running out of ideas and you're preoccupied with something else, that does happen. Just try to pay very close attention to these things, and then I'm sure you'll be able to avoid those overall. Okay, great. So that's that for your grammar and accuracy. That's why I gave you 7 there. Moving on to your pronunciation. So you're definitely easy to understand throughout. I didn't have any trouble understanding what you were saying. I mean, there are some minor things that, mispronounce here and there, but it doesn't have any effect on the understanding. So you did try some intonation. I think, you had your little melody going on. You had your ups and downs in your voice. I think you can maybe even do a little bit more, especially when you have, like the first reaction to a question. Things like absolutely. You can stress that a little bit more just to, polish it up in the end, right? But overall, I think you have very good pronunciation. One little tip from me is I heard that you said things like kinda. I mean, that means that you're definitely comfortable. However, I would not recommend doing that in your IELTS exam. Try to, those words kind of, or going to, want to, try to pronounce them very clearly. Just in your exam, because otherwise it's kind of considered a pronunciation error, right? Just so you know. Okay, so overall for your pronunciation, I also gave you a 7, which would put you at a 7.5 overall. That means, I think you definitely have the abilities to get where you want to be with your band score. As long as you pay very close attention to the questions that you hear, and you seem to be very comfortable or very familiar with the structure that IELTS has, because it has this very specific structure that you need to follow, right? So do you have any questions?
No, I think it was a rather interesting experience, like to try my strengths, to find out where I have like advanced level maybe, and where I have like some things that I need to polish.
Yes, I mean, as I said before, you definitely have a good command overall. There are just those little things that you can, work on. And then I think you can definitely, have a solid score in the end. Great. Okay. So what do you think of the test? Was it useful to you?
Oh, surely it was. Like, I have never been tested before, and it was a rather interesting experience. Yeah, I think that I will repeat it maybe one day when I will be more confident with yes, maybe when I'll be more confident.
Great. Okay. So do you mind, is it okay if we share this video on our YouTube channel?
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. So
Thank
if there's
you so
nothing
much.
else, no problem. It's my pleasure. So if there is nothing else, we can say goodbye for today. I wish you best of
Yes.
luck with your practice and everything, and take care.